The door swung open softly, and footsteps crossed to him. "Gregor, how fare you?" said Vicus. The old man's voice sounded as exhausted as Gregor felt. He probably hadn't had much sleep either. As head of the Regalian Council, Vicus was overworked anyway. His wife, Sylvette, who'd been in charge of the Regalian army until recently, was about to go on trial for ordering research that had created a plague, and Luxa, his granddaughter, was in terrible danger in the Firelands. No, Vicus couldn't be getting much rest. "Me? I'm good," said Gregor evenly. "Never better." "What think you of the prophecy of time?" asked Vicus. "It's catchy," said Gregor, and slowly, painfully got to his feet. He'd messed up his knee on that last trip. "I came in to remind you how easy it is to misinterpret Sandwich's prophecies," said Vicus. Gregor pulled his sword from his belt and tapped the line about his death with the point of the blade. "This? You think it's easy to misinterpret this?" Vicus hesitated. "Possibly." "Well, it seems pretty clear to me," said Gregor. "Believe me, Gregor, if there was any way I could take your place, fulfill this prophecy myself, I would do it in a moment." Vicus's eyes filled with tears. Despite his own situation, Gregor had to feel sorry for him. Life had not been particularly kind to Vicus, either. "Look, I could have died 50 times down here already. It's a miracle I've lasted this long." If Vicus was this upset, how would Gregor's family react? He didn't ever want to find out. "Just don't tell my mom about it. Or my dad. No one in my family can know, okay?" Vicus nodded in agreement. As Gregor slid the sword back in his belt, Vicus reached for it. Gregor instinctively covered the handle. "It's mine. You gave it to me," he said. How quickly he'd become protective, even jealous of the weapon. Vicus's face registered surprise, then concern. "I had no thought of taking it, Gregor. Only you must wear the sword so." He placed his hand on top of Gregor's and gave the handle a twist. "At this angle, you will avoid cutting your leg." "Thanks for the tip," said Gregor. "Well, I'd better go get this stuff off of me." Although he had washed as best he could at a spring on the cliff, much of the volcanic ash was still eating away at his skin. "Go to the hospital. They have a salve for that," said Vicus. Gregor started for the door, but Vicus stopped him with his voice. "Gregor, you have demonstrated an extraordinary ability to kill. But a year ago, you refused to even touch that weapon. Remember that, even in war, there is a time for restraint. A time to hold back your sword," said Vicus. "Will you do that?" "I don't know," said Gregor. He was too tired to make any noble promises, especially when once he began to fight, he usually lost control of himself. "I don't know what I'll do, Vicus." He sensed the answer was insufficient, so he added, "I can try." Gregor left the room quickly to avoid any further discussion of what he might and might not do. Down in the hospital, he was immediately sent to soak in a tub bubbling with some kind of herbal mixture designed to remove the ash from his skin. As the steam from the concoction filled his lungs, Gregor began to cough up a lot of junk he had inhaled over the last few days. It took not one bath, but 3, until the doctors were satisfied that he was free of the ash, both inside and out. Then they covered his skin in a pleasant-smelling lotion. By the time the process was over, Gregor could barely keep his eyes open. He drank the broth in a bowl held against his lips. He thought he swallowed some medicine, too, and then fatigue began to take over. Gregor grabbed the nearest doctor's sleeve. "I have to go fight!" "Not like this," said the doctor. "Do not worry. Wars are not fleet, meaning they're not quick. There will be much fighting left when you awaken." "No, said Gregor. But somewhere inside himself, he knew the doctor was right. The sleeve slipped from his hand, and he gave in to sleep. Now there's a little break, so some time has gone by. When Gregor opened his eyes, it took him a minute to realize where he was. His hospital room was so clean and well lit after his days on the road. He drowsily took stock of his body. His skin had absorbed the lotion and felt soothed and cool. His knee, which he had injured falling from a rock, had been wrapped and was less painful. Someone had trimmed his ragged nails. He was dressed in fresh clothes. Suddenly, he sat bolt upright, his hand clutching the empty space on his left hip. His sword! Where was his sword? He saw it almost at once, propped in the corner of the hospital room, the sword belt dangling from it. Of course, they had not put him to bed with it. That would have been dangerous. And no one had stolen it. Still, even the 12 feet that separated him from the weapon caused him unease. He did not like it to be out of his reach. Gregor was swinging his stiff legs to the floor to retrieve the sword when a nurse came in with a tray of food and ordered him back to bed. He didn't want to argue with her, so he obeyed. But after she left, he slid the tray under the sheets, got the sword, and propped it right against the side of his bed. Now he could eat. Food had been scant over the last days of the journey. Some fish, a few mushrooms. He was so hungry, he ignored the utensils and scooped up the food with his hands, stuffing it into his mouth. The bland meal, bread, fish chowder, and pudding, tasted wonderful, and he ate every bite. He was wiping his finger around the pudding bowl, trying to get out the last bit, when his old friend Marith came into the room. "You are allowed to have seconds," said the soldier with a smile. He called down the hall for them to bring Gregor more food. Then he limped to a chair by the bed. Gregor noticed he was doing a lot better with his prosthetic leg, but he still needed the help of a cane to walk. "You slept for a full day. How do you feel?" he asked Gregor, giving him a significant look. "Fine," said Gregor. He hadn't been injured badly on this trip. Marith didn't need to look so concerned. Then Gregor realized he was referring to the prophecy calling for the warrior's death. "Oh, you mean..." Dread began to seep into his brain. He pushed it away, still unable to deal with it. "I'm okay, Marith." Marith gave his shoulder a squeeze, but didn't pursue it. Gregor was glad they didn't have to have some big talk about it. "How's Boots and Hazard and everybody?" "Well, they are well. They have all been purged of ash. Hazard is confined to bed until his head wound has healed fully, but Howard's medical training has paid off. He did an excellent job of stitching it," said Marith. "His friend Howard and his bat Nike, Luxa and her bat Aurora, Ripred, they were not safe and clean in the hospital, but fighting to free the mice who were still alive in the Firelands." "Any word from them?" asked Gregor. "None," said Marith. "2 divisions of soldiers have been sent after them. We hope to hear soon. But our normal channels of communication are somewhat disrupted now that Luxa has declared war." Luxa. Gregor felt the back pocket of his pants, but it was empty. His old clothes had probably been destroyed. He felt slightly panicked. I had a picture in my pocket." Marith lifted a photograph off the bedside table and handed it to him. "This?" There they were, Luxa and Gregor, dancing, laughing, captured in one of the really happy moments they had shared. Just a few weeks ago at Hazard's birthday party. Gregor slid the photo into the pocket of his shirt. "Thanks." Marith did not make him explain that either, which was good because Gregor was not sure how to put into words what had begun to happen between himself and Luxa, how their rocky friendship was transforming into an entirely different relationship. "My parents?" Gregor asked. "Your father has been told of your safe return. A bat was sent to the overland with the news as soon as you arrived. He said to tell you that your grandmother and Lizzie are well," said Marith. Then he paused. "And my mom?" prompted Gregor. "She has had a relapse," said Marith. "You mean the plague came back?" said Gregor anxiously. No, but an infection in her lungs," said Marith. "She will mend, but it has weakened her greatly." This was not good. Whatever else happened, Gregor needed to get her home. If he had to die, he had to die. But that made it 100 times more crucial for his mom and Boots to get back to New York City safely. His parents and grandma and sisters had to have one another. The nurse brought another serving of pudding and left. Gregor no longer felt so hungry. He poked at the pudding with his spoon. "Where are the rats now? The ones Eris and I saw headed for Regalia on our way back?" asked Gregor. "Have they attacked the city yet?" No, the rats turned back to the Firelands when they saw our troops fly over, said Merith. What? Said Gregor in surprise. I am sure they mean to bolster the Bane's defenses, said Merith. You mean there's no one here to fight? Gregor's mind suddenly cleared. He had completed this phase of his mission. He had brought back the kids and the wounded to Regalia. He had read the prophecy of time, and most of all, he had taken possession of Sandwich's sword. His next step, he'd assumed, would have been to help defend Regalia from a massive rat attack. But there was no attack on Regalia. This is bad, he mumbled. A rat army waiting at the walls of a well-fortified city was scary, but a rat army descending out in the open was much worse. So what was he doing here, lying in bed, stuffing his face with pudding, while his friends were caught in a battle in the Firelands? Gregor shoved his tray off his legs so quickly that the bowls clattered to the floor. He jumped out of bed and grabbed the sword belt. What are you doing? Said Merith. I'm going back, said Gregor. I'm going back to fight those rats.